What's up, everyone? So today I want to make a video about Clavicular and him going mainstream. So let's get right into it. So if you're unfamiliar with the situation, Clavicular in the past weeks has been able to have some collaborations with some of the biggest streamers across various platforms. So some of the biggest content creators like Aiden Ross and Neon have recently collaborated with Clavicular. I've been able to see some of the clips from the live streams, and it details a lot about, you know, how a normal person in society is viewing things like looksmaxxing and the black pill. And it made me curious to follow up on some of the topics I've touched on in previous videos about what are the implications of this being more mainstream, because I think now that Clavicular's audience has grown significantly, we're going to be able to start to see some more effects of that trickle down into society as time passes. So, what are the effects on the audience? So, if we first look at the audience, it's catching a broader net when you're collaborating with some of the biggest streamers, and then you're going on to do boxing commentating with Aiden Ross, like all of those things, you're going to be able to hit a broader audience. And what does that mean? He's still talking about all of these looks maxing and black pill truths and protocols. And you take someone like Clavicular who's giving the most extreme advice, taking the most extreme, most dedicated looks maxing, and then, sort of spiraling that into a broad audience. I think it's just a matter of time before that starts to catch on more and more in society, and we start to see more surgeries, more steroid use at an earlier age. Now, obviously, I think, as I've touched on in previous videos, this doesn't mean that looks maxing is just going to be the new thing where everyone's going to get way more attractive. It's still, a hobby or a passion that you really have to dedicate yourself to, and have to have some passion or deep reasoning for to really see the reason to make these small marginal improvements every day to get, maybe a half point, a point on your looks, before any like hard procedures, depending on your starting base, of course. But to get into some of the more specific points, I think we have to think about who is the audience. For the people who are watching these streams, most of them I would assume to be in high school to college age range. And that audience is, very impressionable because they're coming across this information for the first time. And this is also really a huge window for them to make improvements if they understand the urgency of looks maxing at a young age. And this audience is also probably going to be some of the most, we'll call it, maybe not necessarily insecure people, but they've been a little bit out of society per se. Because, if you're going on these streams on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and you're not spending time with like friends or you're in relationships, usually that's a sign that you're an incel. And what is that typically going to mean? You're very unattractive. You're potentially struggling socially. You could be neurodivergent, and all these other implications that come with watching these streams. These people are going to be very impressionable, and I can say that from firsthand experience because I used to spend a lot of time watching streams, playing video games. I can tell you that when I was able to meet these people in person, or if they were already my friends in person, I can tell you that there's usually a reason behind all of this. It's a huge cope in a lot of ways. Um, when you get into more of these deeper aspects of like these gaming streaming communities, it's usually an effect of you not having the greatest social life. Um, but obviously, that's not a blanket statement. But that sort of is going to cause more outrage because you get someone like Clavicular who's giving the most extreme message and most extreme protocols, very dedicated, compared to someone like Hey Shami, where he's a little bit more marketable in the sense where he's not really for surgery. He's trying to be a little bit, humble in some of his expectations around looks maxing. It's not really shocking to the audience, where someone like Clavicular has the potential to really blow up a lot more because he's very unapologetic about all of this stuff. And he knows that what he's saying is going to get more hate. So he talks about meth. if he's telling everyone to do steroids and all of these other things that really catch someone's attention for the first time in black pill. And I think, just for reference, I think that's a huge reason why Wheat Waffles has so many mainstream videos, because it just hits so hard some of the data and research behind all these points, and you put a good speaker behind it, it's only going to reach a broader audience. Um, so, I can see this going more and more mainstream, more influencers catching on to it and wanting to sort of feed off on the clips you can get out of a stream, like from someone like him. You get more people retaliating, saying this guy's making people insecure. He's feeding off of these people, and it's really just a spiral effect. It's going to get more people watching. If we think about some of the creators in the red pill space, um, specifically a guy named Andrew. We know there's a reason why, like, he was someone who could go viral easily, because the clips are very shareable, and it's only going to catch up to more mainstream audiences over time. But to get into my next point about how I think it's going to make looksmaxxing and the BP more of a sub niche on the internet, is it's definitely bound to grow in popularity. The same way where you could have a country like the United States where you have the most obese people on earth, but you also have a huge population of the most fit, in shape, health driven people. I think looks is going to be the same way. There's going to be people who come across this information who are rotting on some of these streams, and they're just going to use it as dopamine. But then you're going to get the other side who really sees this as a route to where, if I do this, if I dedicate my life to this, I take the steroids, I get the surgery, I do everything he's saying, I lose the weight, they're going to see that, wow, my life can change significantly. And when you're actually aware of the implications of improving your looks, you get to see it on a day in, day out basis. Whereas if you're just someone who goes through a weight loss protocol, you start at a little bit fat and then you get to lean, you'll start to see some differences, but it's not this huge night and day difference. Whereas if you're starting somewhere way far back and you're like very far down the incel route and you really kind of just got sent, you're going to see a huge difference. It can be very inspiring to some people when they come across some of these transformations. And so that's where I can see this start to be growing as a sub niche, and you're going to get more people realizing that this stuff is important, and it's better to take action immediately. And a comparable, thing is the gym. So like commercial gyms weren't really a thing till like the 1980s. Like the gym culture wasn't really a thing before that, when you were thinking about like survival. Like I think a lot of people forget, in a place like the United States, you're constantly in some of these wars that had a much bigger impact on society. Women were staying home. And the more and more, the sexual revolution comes into play, I think, gyms becoming more popular is a correlation to that. So I think looks maxing is now just the second wave of that, where these things take time to develop as like these sub niches, and they can only grow. And one thing I also want to mention is, due to all this, it's going to be harder over time, especially if you're going down these routes where maybe men are taking some of his advice and want to start using makeup and some of these other enhancements in the eye area per se. Uh, all of these things are going to be like potentially more on the radar of women. Now, I don't think a lot of women are coming across like Aiden Ross streams, but more or less, I mean, it's easy to find a TikTok nowadays. It's like looksmaxxing. I'm pretty sure that's going to exist. So it, it could be harder to hide this sub niche. Whereas the thing I would say, like the gym niche and bodybuilding, like if you're smart about it, you typically, if and you're into bodybuilding, you don't generally want to be the guy like, hey, like I'm on steroids, I'm a huge bodybuilder. If you're doing it more for like trying to hide it in a way where you're not like, hey, I like posing in the mirror, you're trying to act, normal to women and whatnot. Over time, like it's going to be more acceptable, the same way we're bodybuilding. Like the more exposure on social media, it's like, oh, just that guy's like a bodybuilder or something. Whereas like looksmaxxing could become the same way, where like this guy's just a looksmaxer. So it can be harder to hide some of these things as you build deeper relationships. But I'd be curious to hear your guys' opinions on this, because I think it is very interesting to see how these communities change over time just between the internet. Now, obviously, I could have a bias just because I'm in the community, but I think when you do get like a huge creator, collaborating with someone like Aiden Ross, like that provides a huge network to Clavicular now. So curious to see where things go, and I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video.